One of the most stunning offerings of testimony in American history just then from former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson, a top aide to the then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, describing conversations that she was a part of in which there were warnings of violence before January 6th, describing hearing Donald Trump ordering individuals to stop putting Trump supporters through magnetometers because the weapons they were carrying, he believed, were not going to be used against him. Describing Secret Service agents talking about how Donald Trump, inside the Beast, the secure presidential limo, after the January 6th rally, President Trump ordering them to take him to Capitol Hill, and when they would not do so because they did not believe it was secure, among other reasons, President Trump, according to these Secret Service agents who relayed this to Cassidy Hutchinson, lunged at the wheel and then lunged at the throat and clavicle of his Secret Service agent, Robert Engel. It was devastating testimony, a portrait of a president who was completely and utterly out of control and without question knew of the danger of his supporters that were going to the mall. And Jamie Gangel, we've heard a lot of shocking things since Donald Trump came down that escalator in 2015. Right. This was obscene.
It is worse than we ever imagined. And the notion that he was so, from the notion that he was so obsessed with his crowd size that he wanted people coming in with weapons to fill it out. But to your point, Jake, the most shocking thing I think we've heard today is that everybody knew that there was a real chance of violence. Trump clearly knew, and he physically got into an altercation with his Secret Service because he wanted to go to the Capitol.
I know everybody wants to talk, but I do want to get to the legalities of this, Laura Coates. Was that just testimony that President Trump committed a crime?
I believe it is. And what if they'd had that the second impeachment hearing? There was all sorts of notions about whether it was premeditated, whether he had invited the violence to the Capitol, whether he knew about any of these details. The idea that they went through the timeline, 2 to 3 minutes prior to him going on that stage, he was aware that there were weapons in the crowd. People did not want them to be going through the magnometer. That he wanted to know that it was about the crowd size still, and was going to march with them to the Capitol because he knew they were not there for him and the target was the actual people at Congress. This is somebody laying out methodically, state of mind, premeditation.
And blowing away the lies of Team Trump, which said this was the crowd, they were frustrated and it spiraled out of control, it was spontaneous. No, they knew for days these people were coming with weapons. Mark Meadows talking to Scott Perry, the congressman, should the president come into the Capitol, should he just give a speech? Mark Meadows talking to Rudy Giuliani, should they go into the House chamber? Pat Cipollone repeatedly in the days beforehand saying, do not send the president there. If the president gets anywhere near there are big legal consequences. Obstructing Congress, obstructing the Electoral College count. They knew.
And I want to bring this in, Casey, because you were there at the Capitol that day. So you might respond to this in addition to as a journalist, as somebody who was literally under threat.
As a human, yeah. Look, Jake, honestly, that was really hard to hear. And it really sent me back to that day. And just for context, I was with NBC News at the time. I was covering what we thought was going to be a pretty routine certification of the election. But we quickly realized, as we were watching the president's speech from the ellipse, that something was happening. And a colleague of mine and I looked out the window, eventually, of the Russell Senate Office Building, which is where many reporters cover these types of events from. And we saw what was happening. We looked at ourselves. We thought, we have to try to get to the Capitol. Historically, that's the safest place to be. The doors were already chained. And now we're learning that, in fact, the United States president, who, let's just be clear, is supposed to be the president for all Americans, knowingly encouraged, sent, and in fact tried to join what he knew was an armed mob, arguably a militia or an army. I mean, I'm not sure exactly, we don't know exactly how he thought of it, but he sent an army down to take over the United States Capitol. including me, my colleagues, and all of the people up there. So, I mean, it's a pretty astonishing day.
I mean, the timeline itself is so damning. 10:15 a.m., Cassidy Hutchinson testifies that the head of basically the security for the White House and the president came to the chief of staff and said, there are knives, guns, pistols, spears, flagpoles. Ornato said, quote, these effing people are fastening spears to the end of their flagpoles. They knew for hours, and they allowed, I think it's amazing to me that they even allowed this rally to go forward knowing how dangerous it was.
And Trump